Rob Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And at the outset, I declare my interest, having served as a magistrate for 12 years, as a member of the Sentencing Council and as a non-executive director of Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, all prior to my election. In my role on the bench, I sentenced many people to community payback. It is a superb way to achieve the purposes of sentencing. It acts as a punishment by depriving offenders of their free time. It makes reparation to the public by improving local community facilities, and it often also helps to rehabilitate by providing offenders with new skills or at times giving them their first ever experience of work. And I've heard many accounts of people who've gone on to use those skills and that experience in later employment that does reduce their likelihood of committing further offences and so reduces the number of victims of crime. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, over the past 2 years, we have had the COVID pandemic. And when I first saw this motion on the order paper, I thought perhaps the Labour Party had forgotten about that. Then, of course, I realised they hadn't, because their leader constantly wanted to keep us in lockdown. The pandemic had a massive impact on work across the entire country, so it's hardly surprising, surely, that community payback fell considerably during that time, or indeed that the type of work offenders are asked to do adapted to the circumstances of the COVID restrictions that were in place. It seems to me to make sense that when it was necessary, offenders were given tasks that they could complete at home, tasks that included making PPE, making face coverings, things that became such a vital part of everybody's life during those grim COVID days. I don't for a second claim that that was perfect, but surely it was better to have people carrying out their sentence in some form, producing something useful and contributing to their local community. What would Labour prefer? That they're all sat watching Bargain Hunt while waiting for life to return to normal? And what about those offenders whose health meant that they needed to shield for longer than others? Does Labour think they should just have been let off? We certainly do not. In fact, doesn't it make sense that community payback can adapt to circumstances? That if a person is unable to work in a certain location, perhaps because of a physical disability, that other provision can be made for them to repay their debt to society. In my own time at HMPPS, I constantly called for greater innovation. It strikes me this is exactly what was demonstrated during the pandemic, and indeed we can learn from in the future. And I do think that this is an appropriate time to pay tribute to all the staff of HMPPS for everything they did during the pandemic. On that, I absolutely share the view of some of the members opposite. I've often described those staff as the unsung heroes of our public services, and they certainly proved that over the past 2 years. I'd particularly like to congratulate the winners of the Prison Officer of the Year and the Probation Champion of the Year awards, which were held last week, recognising the outstanding contributions that were made across both services. As the Chief Executive of HMPPS said then, the incredible work on show reflects the resilience and professionalism seen every day from the fantastic staff in prisons and probation. So that's why, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm absolutely delighted with the investment this government is making to recruit 500 additional community payback staff over the next 3 years, meaning we will see a record-breaking and staggering 8 million community payback hours completed each year. And it is worth saying that community payback, as my honourable friend, who is still a serving magistrate, pointed out, community payback is just one of a wide range of non-custodial sentencing options that are open to magistrates and judges. I very much hope that the recent unification of community rehabilitation companies and the National Probation Service will lead to wider use of community orders, where doing so protects the public and has the confidence of the judiciary. I'm very pleased that we've already seen the introduction of tougher community sentences under this government. One aspect of that is doubling the length of time an offender can be subject to curfew restrictions, rising from 12 to 24 months. Over time, I personally hope the MOJ will be able to look at further ways of creating new forms of community sentence. A couple of years ago, I worked with the Centre for Social Justice on just such a proposal. We call it the Intensive Control and Rehabilitation Order, the ICRO. On that sentence, offenders would wear GPS tags that would track their movements and would be confined to their homes on a highly restrictive curfew. During that time, they would only be allowed to go out or anywhere else for specified reasons: a job, meetings with their probation officer, undertaking reparation work, doing something specific for victims, or attending courses to address their offending behaviour. To some extent, it would be a midpoint between current community orders and a spell in prison. I'd very much welcome the chance to discuss that further with ministers on the front bench. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, for now, I return to the point that I made earlier in my remarks. My puzzlement at this motion today from Labour. The government is committed to community payback, and it can prove it with the work done so far and the work to come, the money being spent and the staff being recruited. Indeed, this government is committed to tackling crime and reducing the number of victims in a plethora of ways, increasing the number of police officers, giving those police more powers, toughening sentences for the most serious crimes, measures that the party opposite has opposed time after time. The honourable lady opposite on the front bench, who sits there shaking her head at me, the member for Lewisham West and Penge, she was right on one thing. This debate will indeed show which party is serious about tackling crime. It is this party, the Conservative Party. It always has been, it always will be. I am proud to be on this side of the House, in the party that takes the action and makes the investments to put victims first.